a werewolf shifter romance audiobook. They told me the moon chooses everyone, except me. Tonight, the ritual circle is full of wolves ready to claim their fated mates. Tonight, I'm supposed to finally shift, finally belong. Tonight, I learn what it feels like when the entire pack decides you were a mistake. My name is Harlyn Sage, and this is the night I stop being prey and start becoming the storm. Welcome to the story. Don't look away. It gets brutal. It gets beautiful. And it starts. Right now. Chapter 1. The night the moon turned its back. The howl that should have been mine died in my throat as every wolf in the circle lowered their eyes, and the moon itself turned its face away from me. Cold stone bit into my bare knees. The ritual circle had been carved into the oldest granite on the ridge centuries ago. Silver runes glowed like fresh scars beneath the full moon. Hundreds of wolves stood shoulder to shoulder around me, their breath fogging in the late autumn air. Gold, amber, ice-blue eyes, all dropped to the ground at once. Not one of them would meet my gaze. I felt the rejection before Higan even spoke, like a blade sliding slow between my ribs. I was 23 and still hadn't shifted. Tonight was supposed to change that. Tonight was supposed to be my claiming. The wind tasted metallic. My skin prickled under the weight of 1,000 stares that refused to land. My chest was too tight for air. My wolf, if she even existed, clawed at the inside of my bones, frantic, ashamed. Higan Sinclair stepped forward, all 6'5" of him carved from arrogance and muscle. Moonlight slid over the hard planes of his face and caught on the alpha brand seared into his collarbone. He looked like every stupid fantasy I'd ever had. He stopped 2 feet away, close enough that I smelled cedar and gun smoke rolling off his skin. "Harlyn Sage," he said, voice rolling across the circle like thunder. "The moon has spoken." My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I tasted blood. He lifted his chin, letting every wolf see the disgust curling his lip. "You are unchosen, unwanted, wolfless." Each word landed like a separate fist. "By right of ritual, I reject you as mate, as pack, as anything that breathes under my protection." A murmur rippled through the crowd, part pity, part relief. It wasn't them. I waited for the pain to crest, for humiliation to drown me. Instead, something inside me cracked open. The air changed. The temperature plummeted 10 degrees in a heartbeat. Frost spidered across the granite beneath my palms. My vision flared, green at the edges, then molten gold. The forest behind the circle answered. Wind screamed through the pines, carrying the scent of lightning and wet earth. Branches whipped as if they reached for me. Every wolf flinched as one. Higan's eyes finally locked on mine, and for the first time that night, uncertainty lived in them. I rose slowly. My knees no longer shook. I was born to be chosen. Instead, I was born to break the choosing. The words didn't leave my mouth, but they burned across my tongue like prophecy. Higan snarled, fangs lengthening. "Kneel and accept the rejection, Harlyn. Don't make this worse." I laughed. It came out raw, cracked, ancient. "Worse?" My voice didn't sound like mine anymore. It echoed, layered, as if the ridge itself spoke through me. "You just freed me." His hand lashed out to seize my throat, alpha speed, brutal. My body moved before I commanded it. I twisted, caught his wrist, and the ground between us erupted. Roots, thick as my thigh, black and glistening, punched through stone and coiled around his forearm like living manacles. Gasps ricocheted through the circle. Higan ripped free, silver blood dripping where the roots had torn skin. His eyes were wide, pupils blown. "What the hell are you?" he hissed. I didn't know. But whatever it was, it had woken up. The runes on the stone flared white-hot. My scar, the one on my left shoulder I'd carried since infancy, ignited. Fire poured through my veins, exquisite and terrifying. I couldn't stay here, not with their fear choking the air. I turned and ran. Granite gave way to pine needles that sliced my bare feet. Cold air knifed my lungs. Behind me, the pack exploded into chaos. Shouts, snarls, Higan roaring my name like a curse. Branches clawed at my face, yet they parted seconds before they struck, as if the forest shielded its own. My heartbeat synced with something deeper, drumbeats beneath the earth, older than wolves. I ran until the ridge was only memory and the cursed woods swallowed me whole. Only then did I collapse against the trunk of a lightning-blasted oak, chest heaving, tears carving hot tracks down my cheeks. The rejection mark that should have bloomed red and ugly on my collarbone had vanished. In its place, faint green-gold runes pulsed beneath my skin like living tattoos. I touched them with trembling fingers. The bark behind me warmed, as if it recognized me. A twig snapped, my head jerked up. 10 feet away, half hidden in shadow, stood a man. Scarred. Tall. Silver eyes that caught the moonlight like twin blades. Dark hair fell over a face hewn from the same stone as the ridge. He wore black and moved like smoke. The air around him felt heavier. Older. He didn't speak. He only watched me with an intensity that made my new power flare in warning. I scrambled to my feet. Roots rose instinctively around my ankles, like guard dogs. The stranger's gaze dropped to the glowing runes on my chest, then to the old bite scar on my shoulder that now burned hotter than ever. His nostrils flared. Something raw and possessive flickered across his face. Then he was gone, melted into the trees so fast I almost believed I'd imagined him. But the scar kept burning, and deep in the dark, something inside me whispered a name I had never heard before, in a voice that tasted like midnight and storms. Ethan. The bite scar branded itself deeper. A mark I suddenly remembered had never been an accident. For the first time that night, I wasn't running from the pack. I was running toward whatever had just woken up inside me. Chapter 2. Blood on Sacred Stone. I woke to the scent of ozone and something ancient, something dangerous. Cold dirt pressed against my cheek. My mouth tasted of iron and pine sap. For one terrifying heartbeat, I couldn't remember where I was, only that every inch of me hurt like I'd been cracked open and poorly glued back together. Then the night rushed in. The circle, Higan's voice, the roots that answered me, the stranger with silver eyes. I jerked upright. Dawn bled pale gold through the canopy, turning the cursed woods into a cathedral of mist and shadow. My torn ritual gown hung off one shoulder, soaked with dew and streaked with dirt. The bite scar on my left shoulder throbbed like a second heartbeat. I looked down. The rejection mark was gone. Completely. Where Higan's rejection should have left a raw red brand, my skin now shimmered with faint green-gold runes that moved when I breathed, like living vines beneath the surface. I brushed trembling fingers across them. The moment I made contact, the forest answered. Vines erupted from the earth around me in a perfect circle, thick as my wrist, curling upward like they were greeting the sun. Leaves unfurled and fast-forward, emerald and wet. One vine brushed my wrist, gentle, curious, then retreated back into the soil as if it had only wanted to say hello. My tears fell before I could stop them. They hit the ground, and tiny white flowers pushed up instantly, blooming and dying in the space of a single breath. I wasn't crying from pain anymore. I was crying because something inside me finally felt right. Footsteps, not the careless crunch of a wolf on patrol. These were silent, deliberate, the sound of a predator who didn't need to announce himself. I surged to my feet, vines snapping upright around me like spears. He stepped out of the mist as if the forest had exhaled him, the stranger from last night. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. 6.5 feet of lean muscle wrapped in black leather and scars. His hair was the color of a raven's wing, falling over a face that looked carved by centuries instead of years. The scar that cut through his left eyebrow and down to his cheekbone was old, silver, brutal, and his eyes, molten silver, ringed in black, locked on me like I was the only thing in the world worth seeing. He stopped just outside my circle of vines. "You weren't rejected, little wolf," he said, voice like gravel dragged across midnight. "You were unchained." The words slid under my skin and rooted there. I lifted my chin, even though my legs shook. "Who are you?" "Someone who's been waiting a very long time for you to wake up." He took one step closer. The vines hissed, tightening. He didn't flinch. "Easy," he murmured, and the sound stroked down my spine like a hand. "They know me." As if to prove it, the thickest vine uncoiled from the ground and brushed against his boot, almost affectionate, before settling again. I stared, heart hammering. "What did you do to me?" "I saved you." His gaze dropped to the bite scar on my shoulder. 23 years ago. The world tilted. I remembered nothing from the night I was born except stories. Fever, blood, my mother screaming that something was coming for me. The pack said a rogue wolf had attacked the birthing den. They said I was lucky to survive. But this man, this creature, looked at the scar like he'd branded me himself. He lifted his hand slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, he pressed 2 fingers to the raised mark. Power surged between us like lightning finding ground. My knees buckled. He caught me before I hit the dirt, one arm sliding around my waist, the other still touching the scar. His skin burned hotter than any wolf I'd ever met. I felt his heartbeat through his ribs, slow, ancient, steady. Memory that wasn't mine flooded in. A newborn's cry. Blood on snow. A woman with eyes like spring leaves begging him to hide what I was, before the pack killed me for it. His teeth sinking into infant soft skin, sealing something vast and dangerous behind a wall of primordial power. I gasped, jerking back. "You bit me," I whispered. "You hid me." "I had to." His voice was rough, almost angry. "A Lupomancer born inside a pack? They would have torn you apart before you drew your first breath." Lupomancer. The word cracked open something inside my skull. Old stories. Forbidden stories. A creature born from the union of Gaia, sorceress, and werewolf, capable of commanding both earth magic and wolf itself. The last one had nearly destroyed the world 9 centuries ago. I laughed, and it came out broken. "So what happens now? You drag me off to finish the job?" "No." He released me but didn't step back. "Now I teach you not to destroy it by accident." I wrapped my arms around myself. The vines lowered, sensing my fear. "And if I say no?" His eyes darkened. "Then Higan finds you by nightfall. The council already knows something broke loose last night. They'll burn these woods to ash to get to you." My stomach dropped. He extended his hand, palm up. Scars crossed it like a map of violence. "Come willingly, Harlyn Sage. Or I carry you. Your choice." I stared at his hand. At the vines waiting for my command. At the runes glowing brighter on my skin the longer he stood close. I was terrified. I was furious. I was alive in a way I had never been before. I placed my trembling hand in his. The moment we touched, the bond snapped taut between us. Old, unbreakable, hungry. Power poured from him into me and back again, a circuit that made my blood sing and my bones ache with rightness. His fingers tightened. His pupils blew wide. "Fuck," he breathed, almost too low to hear. Then he pulled me closer. Not gentle, not rough, just inevitable, and pressed his forehead to mine. "Breathe," he ordered. "Feel me anchor you." I did. His scent, storm and cedar, and something darker, filled my lungs. The runaway magic inside me quieted, curling up like a wild thing finally given a den. When he pulled back, his eyes had bled completely silver. "My name is Ethan Starrk," he said. "And you, little Lupomancer, just became the most dangerous creature on this continent." I swallowed. "What happens now?" "Now?" A muscle jumped in his jaw. "Now I keep the promise I made the night I bit you. I protect you. I teach you. And I keep my hands off you until you're strong enough to break me if you want to." The words hung between us, raw and impossible to misinterpret. Heat flooded my cheeks. The bond pulsed, hot and interested. Ethan stepped back, breaking the contact like it burned him too. "Come," he said, voice rough. We have a long way to run before the sun sets, and the council's trackers are already on your scent." He turned and walked into the trees. The vines parted for him like they had for me. I looked back once, at the circle of white flowers that had bloomed and died where my tears fell. Then I followed the man who had hidden me my entire life. Straight into the truth I wasn't sure I was ready to survive. But as his silhouette disappeared into the green, the bite scar on my shoulder flared one final time. Pleased, possessive, awake. And for the first time in 23 years, I didn't feel alone. Chapter 3. The first howl that wasn't hers. I ran until my lungs bled, but the forest bent toward my footsteps now. Sunlight slanted through the canopy in thin gold blades, warming the dew on my skin, turning every breath into steam. Ethan moved ahead of me, never more than 20 feet, never less than 10. He didn't look back, but I felt his attention like a hand at the base of my spine. Steady, possessive, patient. We had been moving since dawn. No paths, no rest. Just the hush of needles underfoot and the low thunder of my own pulse. My legs burned, but the earth kept giving back. Every time my foot landed, strength flowed up through the soul. Warm, green, alive. The forest was feeding me, and I was too terrified to ask why. Ethan finally stopped at the lip of a hollowed-out redwood, so wide 10 men couldn't link arms around it. The inside had rotted centuries ago, leaving a cavern roofed by living wood. Sunlight dripped through cracks like molten honey. He ducked inside without a word. I followed. The air inside was cooler, scented with moss and distant rain. A circle of smooth stones sat in the center, blackened by old fires. Someone, Ethan, had been using this place for a very long time. "Sit," he said, nodding at the largest stone. I stayed standing. "You said you'd teach me. Start talking." A faint smile ghosted across his scarred mouth. "Demanding little thing." He moved to the far wall and pressed his palm to the bark. The redwood groaned softly. Roots unfurled from the ceiling like hanging ropes, weaving themselves into a living chair opposite me. He sat on a fallen log instead, leaving the throne of roots for me. Show off. I lowered myself into it anyway. The roots adjusted instantly, cradling my spine, warm as sun-soaked stone. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Lesson 1. A Lupomancer doesn't borrow power from the earth. She is the earth. Every tree, every blade of grass, every drop of sap. It's all yours if you learn how to ask. Ask, I repeated flatly. Not take? Never take. His voice dropped. The moment you take, the earth starts keeping score, and it always collects. He extended one hand, palm up. A single acorn rested there. He closed his fist. When he opened it again, a sapling stood 6 inches tall, leaves trembling. My mouth went dry. Your turn, he said, and tossed the sapling to me. I caught it on reflex. The moment my skin touched bark, the thing shot upward, 2 feet, 4, 8, roots exploding from the soil at my feet, trunk thickening until it scraped the cavern roof. Leaves burst open in a green thunder. I yelped and dropped it. The tree kept growing, indifferent. Ethan stepped in amusement. Too much, he said. You shouted. Try whispering. I glared at him, but the tree finally stilled, swaying gently like nothing had happened. We drilled for hours. He made me pull water from stone, made me braid vines into knots with nothing but intention, made me listen until I could hear the slow heartbeat of the redwood itself. Every time I faltered, the bond between us tugged, sharp, almost painful, until I found my balance again. By late afternoon, I was shaking with exhaustion and exhilaration. Sweat plastered my hair to my neck. My fingertips glowed faintly, green light pulsing under the skin. Ethan watched me with that unreadable silver stare. Again, he said for the 100th time. I lifted my hand to call another vine, and the world tilted. Power surged up through the soles of my feet so hard my vision whited out. I heard screaming, mine, maybe, and then I was on my knees without knowing how I got there. When sight returned, the cavern floor was cracked open. A body lay half buried in the fresh earth. A wolf. Long dead. Ribs showing through matted gray fur, jaws frozen in a snarl. Except its eyes snapped open. Milky white, glowing with the same silver as Ethan's eyes. It lurched upright on broken legs. I scrambled backward, slamming into the redwood wall. "Ethan!" "I see it," he said quietly. The corpse took one shambling step toward me, then another. Its head hung at the wrong angle, but those silver eyes fixed on me with desperate recognition. Ethan moved between us in a blur, but he didn't strike. He simply placed himself in its path, palms open. "Easy, brother," he murmured to the dead thing. "She didn't mean it." The wolf whined, a sound like wind through a graveyard, and collapsed. The silver light guttered out. It was just bones and fur again. I couldn't breathe. Ethan turned to me slowly. For the first time since I'd met him, something like fear lived in his expression. "You called him," he said. "From death, not half-life. Full recall." My stomach lurched. I didn't mean, I know." He crouched in front of me, hands hovering like he wanted to touch, but didn't trust himself. "But you need to understand what that means. Lupomancers don't just command the living earth. They command what the earth remembers. Every wolf that ever died on this soil is still here, waiting for a voice strong enough to speak their name." I stared at the corpse. "What was his name?" Ethan's jaw worked. "Kale. My brother. Died shielding me 400 years ago." The air left my lungs in a rush. 400 years. I looked at Ethan, at the weight in his silver eyes, the scars that suddenly made horrible sense, and something inside me broke open all over again. He reached out at last, cupping my face with both hands. His palms were furnace hot. "You're not a wolf," he said, voice raw. "You're the thing wolves are afraid of in the dark." I laughed, or maybe I sobbed. The sound scraped my throat. He brushed a tear from my cheek with his thumb. The touch lingered too long. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "For calling him." "Don't be." His forehead rested against mine. "He forgave me a long time ago. Seeing you, he just wanted to look." The bond between us flared, bright and aching. I felt his grief like it was mine, ancient, endless, carried alone for centuries. My hands found his wrists, holding on. "You called me once with a cry you don't remember," he said against my temple, so quiet I almost missed it. "Don't make me come running again." I pulled back just enough to see his face. His eyes were closed. Pain and want warred there in equal measure. I touched the hidden scar I could suddenly feel beneath his shirt, mirror to my own, older, deeper. A flash, snow, blood, a newborn's wail. His teeth on my infant shoulder. A promise made in desperation. The vision vanished as fast as it came. Ethan inhaled sharply, like I'd struck him. I didn't let go. The cavern held its breath around us. Even the redwood seemed to lean in. He opened his eyes, silver completely swallowed by black now, and looked at me like I was both salvation and ruin. Then he stood in one fluid motion, putting 3 deliberate feet of space between us. "Enough for today," he said, voice gravel rough. "You're shaking." I hadn't noticed. My entire body trembled, spent magic leaking from me like blood. Ethan caught me before I slid off the root throne. One arm under my knees, the other around my back. He lifted me like I weighed nothing. "I should walk," I mumbled, face against his chest. "You'll fall," he answered. "And I'm not letting you hit the ground again, not tonight." His heartbeat thundered under my ear, too fast for something ancient. He carried me deeper into the redwood, where the roots had woven a hollow bed of moss and shadow. He laid me down gently, but his hands lingered, brushing hair from my face, checking the glow under my skin like he was looking for cracks. "Sleep," he ordered. I caught his sleeve. "Stay." He froze. "Please," I whispered. "Just don't leave." Something shattered behind his eyes. He stretched out beside me, careful, giving me every chance to change my mind. When I didn't, he pulled me against his chest, one arm locked around my waist, the other cradling my head. The bond settled, warm and quiet at last. I'm not a wolf, I thought, drowsy, already falling. I'm the thing wolves are afraid of in the dark. Ethan's lips brushed my temple, barely there. Good, he murmured into my hair. Then the dark should be very afraid of you. Outside, the redwood creaked, ancient and approving. Inside, wrapped in the arms of the creature who had hidden me my whole life, I finally let the exhaustion take me. And for the first time in 23 years, I didn't dream of being chosen. I dreamed of choosing. Chapter 4. The Law of Forbidden Blood. The Council of Alphas summoned me for execution because a Lupomancer had not walked the earth in 9 centuries. The words still rang in my skull 3 days later as Ethan dragged me, barefoot, furious, glowing faintly green at the edges, through the marble corridors of the conclave hall. Iron torches hissed in their sconces. Every footstep echoed like a war drum. I wore a borrowed black shirt that smelled of Ethan and nothing else. My runes crawled beneath the fabric, restless, tasting the hatred in the air. 24 alphas waited in the grand chamber, seated on stone thrones carved from the bones of mountains. Their combined power pressed against my skin like a storm front. At the center sat the High Alpha, a woman older than redwoods, eyes the color of winter frost. Higan Sinclair stood at her right hand, arms folded, smug as sin. He hadn't expected me to survive the woods. He definitely hadn't expected me to walk in, flanked by something that made every wolf in the room bare their throats without realizing it. Ethan stopped 10 feet from the circle of thrones. He didn't bow. He didn't speak. He simply existed, and the air bent around him like light around a black hole. I stepped forward alone. The High Alpha's gaze sliced into me. Harlyn Sage, you stand accused of forbidden blood. The penalty is death by dismemberment and burning. How do you answer? My voice didn't shake. 3 days of Ethan's brutal lessons had burned the tremor out of me. I answer that your law is older than your fear, I said, and tonight both are going to break. A growl rolled through the chamber. Higan smiled, slow and cruel. Still no wolf, Harlyn. Still nothing but tricks and dirt magic? He stepped down from the dais. The torches guttered as he passed. Let me solve this for the council, he said, loud enough for every alpha to hear. Old law allows a rejected female to be claimed by any alpha who will take responsibility for her crimes. I will take her as mate. I will leash the abomination. The pack keeps its honor. The council keeps its hands clean, and the little freak lives. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that I smelled cedar and gun smoke again. Close enough that his next words were for me alone. On your knees, Harlyn. Beg, and I'll only break you a little. Every rune on my body flared white-hot. Ethan's power brushed my mind, one warning pulse. Control. Don't kill him here. I smiled, and the earth answered. The marble floor cracked like thin ice. Black roots, thick as pythons, punched upward, wrapping Higan's ankles, his calves, his thighs in the space of a heartbeat. They dragged him down hard. His knees hit stone with a wet crack. Gasps echoed off the vaulted ceiling. I stepped over the writhing roots until I stood above him. Touch me, I said, voice soft enough that the entire chamber strained to hear. And every root in this valley will drink you dry. Higan snarled, claws raking at the living restraints. Silver blood spattered the marble. The roots only tightened, thorns blooming along their length like roses made of knives. The High Alpha rose slowly. Release him. No, I answered. Power flooded the room, ancient, green, unstoppable. The torches turned emerald. Vines crawled down the walls, curling around the thrones of every alpha who had ever looked at me like trash. I felt their fear like wine on my tongue. Ethan moved then, silent as smoke, until he stood at my left shoulder. Not behind me. Beside me. He said nothing. He didn't need to. His presence alone reminded every wolf in the room that some monsters were older than their laws. Higan's second, a mountain of a man named Garrick, lunged. Ethan caught him by the throat mid-air and slammed him into the floor hard enough to crack marble. The sound was final. "Next," Ethan said, voice calm, almost bored. Silence fell so complete I heard my own heartbeat. I looked at the high alpha. "You want me leashed? Try it yourselves." The roots around Higan flexed, lifting him until his boots dangled inches above the ground. His face purpled. The high alpha's eyes flicked to Ethan, calculating. Then she did the last thing I expected. She knelt. One by one, every alpha in the chamber followed. Some fast, some slow, some with hatred burning in their eyes. But they knelt, because they finally understood what they were looking at. I released Higan. He dropped like a corpse, coughing blood. I walked forward until I stood in the center of the circle of kneeling alphas. "My name is Harlyn Sage," I said, letting my voice carry to the rafters. "I am Lupomancer. I am not your mistake. I am not your shame. And I will never kneel again." The vines retracted slowly, leaving only scars on the marble and terror in the air. I turned to leave. Higan surged up behind me, half mad with rage, claws extended for my throat. Ethan met him first. One moment, Higan was airborne. The next, he was on his back, Ethan's boot on his throat, silver eyes promising murder. "Touch her," Ethan said, soft as a lullaby, "and I will unmake every generation of your bloodline." "Slowly!" Higan went very still. Ethan removed his boot and stepped back to my side. We walked out together. The corridor outside was empty. Guards had fled the moment the earth began to scream. Our footsteps echoed like gunshots. Halfway to the exit, the bond between us flared so violently I stumbled. Ethan caught me, hands on my waist, pulling me against the nearest wall. His breathing was ragged. "You just declared war on every pack in the Northwest," he rasped against my temple. "Good," I whispered. "Let them come." His laugh was low, broken, proud. My runes flared again, this time not from anger. From him. From the way his thumbs traced the skin just above my hips. From the way his scent flooded my lungs until I couldn't think. I tilted my head back to look at him. His eyes were pure molten silver. "Careful, little wolf," he murmured. "You keep looking at me like that, and I'll forget every promise I made about keeping my hands off you." My pulse thundered between us. "Then don't," I said. His grip tightened for one heartbeat, two. Enough to bruise, enough to brand. Then he let go, stepping back, hands clenched at his sides like it physically hurt. "Not here," he growled. "Not like this." He took my hand instead, fingers laced tight, grounding me, claiming me in the only way he allowed himself. We walked out of the conclave hall into a night that suddenly felt too small for what I had become. Behind us, the earth sealed its cracks. Ahead of us, war waited, and for the first time in my life, I couldn't wait to meet it. Chapter 5. Midnight Lessons in the Hollow Oak. He dragged me into the heart of an ancient tree that bled moonlight. The oak had been split by lightning centuries ago, its two halves grown back together in a twisted embrace, forming a hollow tall enough for Ethan to stand inside without bowing. Silver light poured through the fissure overhead like liquid starfire. I was still shaking from the conclave hall, rage and power and adrenaline sloshing inside me like poison. My runes glowed so bright the black shirt had turned translucent in places. Ethan shut the living door of woven vines behind us with a flick of his wrist. The moment the seal closed, the bond between us snapped tight enough to bruise. He turned. The look he gave me was pure predator. "You almost killed him," he said, voice low. "He deserved it." "Yes," he agreed, "but you don't get to lose control until you can find it again." I laughed, sharp and cracked. "You want me controlled, after what they tried to do?" "I want you alive," he snarled. "And right now, you're a lit fuse with legs." He stepped closer. The air thickened, charged. My back met the inner wall of the oak. Warm, living wood pulsed against my spine like a second heartbeat. "Hit me," he said. I blinked. "What?" "Hit me with everything you have. No holding back. Show me how strong you really are when you're not trying to be polite." I stared at him. "You're insane." "Probably." His smile was all teeth. "Do it." Something inside me, something that had been chained my entire life, roared to the surface. I slammed both palms against his chest and pushed. Power exploded out of me. Vines erupted from the oak's walls, floor, ceiling, thick, black, thorned. They lashed around his wrists, his ankles, his throat, yanking him off his feet and pinning him spread-eagled against the opposite wall. The impact cracked living wood. Moonlight flickered as the vines tightened, thorns drawing silver blood that smoked where it touched the bark. Ethan didn't fight. He just watched me, pupils blown wide, chest heaving. "More!" he rasped. I screamed. The entire hollow shuddered. Roots punched through the floor between us, weaving into a cage of living spears. The temperature plummeted. Frost bloomed across his skin. My runes burned white-hot, searing the shirt to ribbons. I stalked forward until we were nose to nose, vines creaking under the strain of holding him. "You want more?" I whispered. "Fine." I slammed my palm over his heart. The bond detonated. Every ounce of terror, rage, desire I'd swallowed for 23 years poured into him like molten metal. His head slammed back against the wood, a guttural sound tearing from his throat. His eyes bled completely silver. And then he laughed, raw, broken, reverent. "That's it," he growled. "That's my girl." The vines around his throat loosened just enough for him to speak. I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered. He watched me, blood dripping from a dozen shallow cuts, and the look on his face undid me. "Again," he said softly, "but this time, pull it back, leash it, prove you're stronger than the power." I tried. God, I tried. The vines trembled, thorns retracting by millimeters. It wasn't enough. I screamed again, this time in frustration, and the cage exploded outward. Ethan dropped, landing in a crouch, and in one heartbeat, he was on me. He caught my wrists, spun me, pinned me face first against the warm oak wall. His body covered mine, chest to my back, thigh forcing my legs apart so I couldn't find leverage. "Breathe," he ordered against my ear, voice ragged. "Feel the earth. Feel me." I couldn't breathe. I could only feel him, every hard line of him, the furnace heat of his skin, the thunder of his pulse against my spine. His grip on my wrists loosened, slowly, giving me the choice. I didn't move. He released one wrist entirely, sliding his hand down my arm, over my ribs, until his palm settled over the glowing runes on my sternum. "Feel that pull between us?" he whispered, lips brushing the shell of my ear. "That's what you do to the earth, what you do to me." My knees buckled. He held me up, arm banded across my chest now, the other sliding to my throat. Not squeezing, just resting there, claiming. "I'm not your enemy, Harlyn," he said, voice cracking on my name. "But I'm not your savior either. I'm the bastard who bit you to keep you alive, and then spent 23 years pretending I didn't want to crawl inside your skin the second you woke up." The confession tore out of him like shrapnel. I turned in the circle of his arms until we were chest to chest. His eyes were wild, ancient, terrified. I reached up and cupped his scarred face with both hands. "Teach me to be a monster," I whispered. He shuddered, forehead dropping to mine. "I'm teaching you to be a queen." The words broke something open in both of us. He kissed the corner of my mouth, and then stepped back so fast the air cracked. The vines fell away from the walls, retreating like scolded dogs. He stood 3 feet away, fists clenched, blood dripping from his wrists, silver eyes locked on the floor. "I'm sorry," he said, voice shredded. "I promised I'd wait until you could break me if you needed to." I was still pressed to the oak, chest heaving, runes pulsing so bright the hollow looked like daylight. "I don't want to break you," I said. He looked up then. The raw hope in his face nearly killed me. I took one step toward him. He took one back. "Not tonight," he rasped. "Tonight you almost burned the conclave to the ground. You need sleep. You need control. And I—" His laugh was bitter. "I need to remember why I'm not allowed to touch you yet." He turned toward the sealed door. "Ethan!" He froze. I crossed the distance in 3 strides and wrapped my arms around him from behind, face pressed between his shoulder blades. His entire body went rigid. "I'm not asking you to be gentle," I said against his spine. "I'm asking you to stay." His hands came up, covering mine where they rested over his heart. For a long moment, the only sound was our breathing and the slow creak of the ancient oak around us. Then he turned in my arms, cupped my face like I was something holy and breakable, and rested his forehead against mine. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered, "but if I kiss you properly tonight, I won't stop. And you're not ready for what that would unleash." The bond between us throbbed, hot and hungry and ancient. I believed him. I nodded once. He exhaled like a man spared execution. He led me to the bed of moss the oak had woven for us while we fought. We lay down fully clothed, his arms locked around me, my back to his chest, his face buried in my hair. The runes slowly dimmed to a gentle glow. The last thing I felt before sleep took me was his lips brushing the bite scar on my shoulder, soft, reverent, possessive. And the last thing I heard was his broken whisper against my skin. "Sleep, little queen. Tomorrow we teach you how to make the world kneel without ever raising your voice." Outside, the moon bled silver through the fissure. Inside, wrapped in the arms of the monster who had waited centuries for me, I finally slept without fear. Chapter 6. The Claiming That Wasn't. Higan cornered me at the equinox gathering, teeth at my throat, announcing a forced claim sanctioned by old law. The great clearing blazed with bonfires. Every pack from the northwest had come to celebrate the turning of the season, to drink, to dance, to watch wolves find their fated mates under the blood-red moon. I had come for one reason only: to look my family in the eye and make them choose. Ethan stood at the edge of the trees, cloaked in shadow, silver eyes the only thing visible. He had not wanted me here. He had snarled for an hour when I insisted. In the end, he had simply said, "Then I'm one breath behind you the entire night. Try and stop me." I hadn't tried. Now I walked alone through the crowd, barefoot, wearing a dress the color of fresh moss that clung to every new curve power had carved into me. Runes glowed softly beneath the fabric like living jewelry. Wolves parted without realizing why. Some bowed their heads, some bared their throats. All of them felt what I was, even if they didn't have the word yet. My parents stood near the head table, pale and trembling. My little sister clung to my mother's skirts, eyes wide. I stopped in front of them. Mother's hand flew to her mouth. "Harlyn!" "You let them reject me," I said, quiet enough that only they heard. "You stood silent while they called me broken, while they planned to burn me." "Explain." Father couldn't meet my eyes. We thought if we stayed quiet, they'd let you live as Omega, better low than dead." I laughed, and the nearest bonfire flared 10 feet higher. Wolves stumbled back. "Better low than dead," I repeated. "Look at me now." My sister took one hesitant step forward. "You're glowing," she whispered, wonder in her voice. "Yes, Lyra, I am." I knelt so we were eye level. "Never let them tell you what you're worth. Promise me." She nodded, fierce and sudden, tears on her lashes. I pressed a kiss to her forehead, and a tiny vine curled from the earth to circle her wrist like a bracelet. Protection, promise. Then I rose and faced the head table. Higan was already moving. He wore ceremonial black, alpha brands blazing silver across his bare chest. The crowd parted for him like water. His smile was sharp enough to cut. "Harlyn Sage!" he called, voice carrying over every fire. "By right of old law, I claim you as mate. You will kneel, you will bond, and you will heal." He reached for me. I didn't move. The ground between us split. A perfect circle of earth turned to black glass, smooth and shining, reflecting the blood moon like a dark mirror. Higan's hand froze inches from my throat. "I belong to no one," I said, and every word rang like a bell made of thunder. "Least of all you." The glass shattered upward into 1,000 razor shards that hung suspended in the air around us. Gasps, screams. Wolves dropped to their knees. Higan's father, the former alpha, stepped forward, voice shaking with rage. "You refuse a lawful claim. You bring death on your family. Their blood will be on your hands." He gestured, and enforcers dragged my parents and Lyra into the circle. My mother sobbed. My father's face was gray. I felt Ethan move at the tree line, one lethal step forward. I sent a pulse through the bond. "Wait." I looked at my parents. "You taught me silence was safety," I said. "Tonight I teach you what silence costs." I lifted one hand. The glass shards spun faster. Then I closed my fist. Every shard fell at once, embedding point down in the earth, in a perfect ring around my family, close enough that a single flinch would slice skin. Protection, not punishment. I turned to Higan. "You want to use them to cage me?" I asked softly. "Watch what happens when I stop playing nice." The earth beneath the entire gathering groaned. Roots, ancient, massive, punched through the soil, weaving upward into living pillars that blocked every exit. The bonfires roared higher, flames turning emerald. Wolves screamed and ran, but the roots herded them back, gentle but immovable. I walked forward until I stood toe-to-toe with Higan. His claws were out, trembling. I leaned in until my lips almost brushed his ear. "The next time you threaten my blood," I whispered, "I will bury you so deep the earth forgets your name." Then I stepped back and raised my voice to the night itself. No wolf will ever be rejected again. No mate will be forced. The old laws die tonight. I slammed both palms to the ground. Silver light exploded outward in a perfect circle, racing across the clearing, sinking into the soil like seed. Where it touched, new runes bloomed, living, glowing, rewriting the ancient mating bond laws in root and light and blood. The shift rippled across every pack bond on the continent. I felt it, millions of threads snapping and reweaving themselves into something fairer, freer. Wolves cried out as centuries of compulsion shattered. When the light faded, the roots lowered. The fires returned to gold. The glass circle around my family melted back into soft earth. My mother was openly weeping. My father stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Lyra ran to me and threw her arms around my waist. I held her tight. Across the ruined gathering, smoke and blood and awe hanging thick in the air, Ethan stepped out of the shadows. He didn't walk. He stalked. Every wolf between us dropped to their knees without knowing why. He stopped an arm's length away. Silver eyes locked on mine. The bond between us sang, loud, proud, unbreakable. He looked at the wreckage I had made, at the new runes glowing beneath the grass, at the wolves who would never forget this night. Then he looked back at me. And slowly, deliberately, in front of every alpha, every pack, every living soul who had once called me nothing, he sank to one knee. Not submission, offering. His voice carried like a vow carved in stone. "I see you, Harlyn Sage, my alpha, my moon, my only law." Silence fell so complete, the crackle of the fires sounded like gunshots. I walked to him. The earth itself seemed to hold its breath. I cupped his scarred face and pulled him to his feet. Our fingers threaded together, equal, unafraid. Side by side, we faced the gathering that had once broken me. And for the first time in my life, the moon did not turn its face away. Chapter 7. The Bite That Remembers. We fled into the storm-ravaged mountains, hunted by both Council and Higan's enforcers. Rain lashed sideways, driven by a wind that screamed like dying wolves. Lightning stitched the sky white every few heartbeats, turning the pine ridges into black paper cutouts. We ran barefoot over shale that sliced like glass, over snow that burned colder than fire. Ethan carried me the last mile when my legs finally gave out. His arms never trembled. His heart thundered against my ear, steady and ancient and terrified. He kicked open the door to an abandoned ranger cabin high on the spine of the world. The moment we were inside, the storm cut off as if someone had slammed a lid on it. Only the howl of wind through the eaves remained. He set me down on a dusty cot, then barred the door with a fallen beam and every ward he knew. Silver runes flared across the wood, angry and bright. Outside, thunder rolled like war drums. I was shaking too hard to stand. My runes flickered, dimming with every breath. Ethan knelt in front of me, hands hovering over my knees, afraid to touch. "They're close," he said. "Higan's trackers have primordial bloodhounds now. The council sent the black circle. They'll be here by dawn." I laughed, and it came out wet. "Then we die together. Romantic." His face twisted. "Not happening." He stood, paced 3 steps, dragged both hands through his soaked hair. Water and blood ran down his forearms from cuts that were already healing too slowly. "We end this tonight," he said. "One way or another." I sat up straighter. "Meaning?" He turned. Lightning flashed behind his eyes. "I lied to you," he said. "The bite I gave you as a baby, it didn't just hide your power, it tied your life to mine. If I die, you die. If you burn out, I burn with you." The air left my lungs. He kept going, voice shredding. "I'm primordial, Harlyn, oldest thing still walking. The curse keeps me alive, keeps me strong, but it's a bomb with a very long fuse. One day it goes off and takes half the continent with it. That's why I've stayed alone. That's why I bit you. To anchor myself to something that could survive the blast. Something that could, maybe, stop me." He laughed, bitter and ancient. "I thought if I kept you weak, kept you hidden, the fuse would burn slower. Then you woke up and became the only creature on Earth who could pull the pin early or cut the wire entirely." Silence rang louder than thunder. I stood on legs that barely held me and walked to him. "You selfish bastard," I breathed. Then I kissed him like punishment and salvation both. He groaned into my mouth, hands finally, gripping my hips hard enough to bruise. The bond detonated between us, white hot, no walls, no secrets. I tasted storm and blood and 400 years of loneliness. I shoved him back until his spine hit the cabin wall. My palms slammed over his heart. "Show me!" I snarled against his lips. "Show me the curse!" He didn't fight. He ripped his shirt open, buttons scattering like hail. Beneath the scarred skin, black veins pulsed. Thick, wrong, spreading from the center of his chest like spilled ink. I pressed both hands to it. The bond tore wide open. I saw everything, centuries of slaughter, the last Lupomancer burning in his arms while he drank her power to stop a war. The moment he became the monster he killed. The night he found a newborn with green gold eyes and knew she was the only key that could either cage him forever or set him free. I saw the fuse burning, years left at most. I pulled back, gasping. He cupped my face, eyes wild. "Kill me, Harlyn, tonight, before I take you with me." "No." I kissed him again, softer this time, tasting salt and terror. "I'm not your sacrifice," I whispered. "I'm your equal." Then I did the thing he had never prepared for. I sank my teeth into the exact spot on his shoulder where he had bitten me 23 years ago. He roared, body arching against the wall. Power exploded between us, green and silver and black, raw, excruciating. I bit until I tasted his blood, until the old bond shattered like glass. The suppressive layer he had woven around my power tore away in burning threads. I swallowed his scream and gave him mine. Light poured out of us, moonlight and earthfire, and something older than both. The cabin walls groaned. The wards flared white and died. Every window exploded outward in perfect circles of frost. We dropped to the floor together, tangled, gasping, bleeding. The curse in his chest slowed, just a fraction. The black veins retreated by inches. But the new bond that snapped into place between us was different. Equal. 2 anchors instead of 1 chain. He stared at me like I was the first sunrise in 4 centuries. "You crazy, impossible woman," he rasped. I laughed. Or maybe I sobbed. My whole body felt flayed open and reborn. He dragged me into his lap, hands shaking as they traced my face, my throat, the new glowing mark on my shoulder that now mirrored his exactly. "We're both still breathing," I said against his mouth. "Barely." "Good enough." Thunder crashed directly overhead. The cabin shook. They were here. Ethan stood, pulling me with him. We were naked to the waist, covered in blood and frost, and each other's marks, runes blazing like war paint. He looked at me, really looked, and for the first time since I'd met him, he smiled like a man who had been handed a future. "Together?" he asked. I threaded my fingers through his. "Together." Outside, the storm broke open and the hunters came. Inside, 2 monsters who had just chosen each other turned to face the door. And the mountains themselves held their breath. Chapter 8. The Darkest Moon. Higan captured Ethan, chained him in silver, and broadcast his torture to force me to come alone. The message arrived at moonrise, carved into the bark of every tree for 50 miles. "Come to the old circle, or he bleeds until the sun burns out." I found the live feed on a cracked phone one of Higan's wolves had left like bait. Ethan hung spread-eagled between 2 iron posts in the exact spot where I had once knelt, rejected. Silver chains wrapped his wrists, ankles, throat. Runes burned red hot where they touched skin. Every time he sagged, the chains tightened, carving deeper. He was still conscious. Barely. Higan stood behind him, knife tracing lazy lines across Ethan's ribs, smiling for the camera. "Tick-tock, little freak," he crooned. "1 hour. Alone, or I start taking pieces he can't grow back." The feed cut to black. I screamed until my throat bled and the mountain cracked beneath me. Then I walked into the trap. I left every weapon behind. No vines, no roots, just me, barefoot in a black dress soaked with rain, runes blazing like war beacons. The old ritual circle looked exactly the same granite, same silver runes, except now it stank of blood and silver and despair. They had my family too. Mother, father, Lyra, bound and gagged on their knees at the edge of the circle. Higan's enforcers held blades to their throats. I stopped 10 feet from Ethan. He lifted his head. One eye was swollen shut, the other pure molten silver. "Don't!" he rasped. Blood dripped from his mouth. "Run!" Higan laughed and drove the silver knife into Ethan's side. Ethan didn't scream. He just stared at me like I was the only thing keeping him breathing. I smiled, and the earth split open at my command. The circle exploded upward in a ring of black stone and living root. Every enforcer flew backward, slammed into the new walls by vines thick as redwoods. The knives at my family's throats turned to dust. Higan spun, eyes wide. I walked forward. The ground rippled beneath my feet like water. Every step left blooming white flowers that withered into ash the instant I passed. "You wanted a Luna?" I asked, voice soft enough that the night itself leaned in to hear. "You get a catastrophe." I raised one hand. The silver chains around Ethan shattered like glass. He dropped, caught himself on one knee, coughing silver blood. I kept walking. Higan snarled and shifted. Half man, half wolf, a monstrous hybrid of rage. He charged. I didn't slow. The earth rose to meet him, roots punching through his legs, his arms, his chest. They lifted him high above the circle, spread-eagled like he had done to Ethan. Thorns bloomed along every vine, long as swords. Higan screamed. I stopped beneath him. Power poured off me in waves, green, gold, black, endless. The moon above us turned dark, eclipsed by my shadow alone. I looked up at him. "I could kill you," I said. "I could make the roots drink you slow. I could leave your heart beating in the dirt for the crows." His eyes were wild, animal. "But I won't." I closed my fist. The vines tightened until bones cracked. Blood rained down like warm summer rain. Then I opened my hand. The roots lowered him gently, gently, until he lay broken at my feet. I knelt. "I'm not you," I whispered. "I don't need to break things to feel strong." I pressed 2 fingers to his forehead. Power flared, soft this time, almost kind. Every injury I had just given him healed in seconds. Bones knit, skin sealed. But the fear, the memory of helplessness, stayed. I stood. "Live with it," I said. "Live knowing a rejected wolf spared you. Every time you breathe, remember who really holds the power now." I turned away. Ethan was on his feet, swaying, silver blood painting his chest. He stared at me like I was a goddess and a nightmare in one skin. I walked to my family, snapped their bonds with a thought, pulled Lyra into my arms. My mother was sobbing. My father couldn't speak. I kissed Lyra's hair. "Go home," I told them. "You're safe now." They ran. The circle was empty except for me, Ethan, and the broken alpha bleeding on sacred stone. I faced Ethan. He dropped to his knees, not from weakness, but from something deeper. I crossed the space between us. My hands shook when I cupped his bloodied face. "I almost lost you," I whispered. "You didn't." His voice cracked. "You chose mercy. You chose better." I laughed, and it came out wet. "I chose you." He surged up and kissed me, raw, desperate, tasting of silver and storm and salvation. I kissed him back like the world was ending and beginning in the same breath. When we broke apart, foreheads pressed together, he was shaking. "I would have let you kill him," he rasped. "I would have helped. I would have burned the world to keep you safe." "I know," I said. "That's why I didn't." He laughed, broken and beautiful. Then he sank back to his knees, pulling me down with him. We stayed there until the moon came out from behind my shadow, until the blood dried, until the circle remembered what it felt like to hold something holy instead of broken. And somewhere in the dark, a piece of my soul cracked, darkened by the violence I had embraced, by the line I had walked and not crossed. Ethan felt it through the bond. He pressed his lips to my wrist, right over the pulse. "I've got you," he whispered. "We carry the dark together now." I believed him, because for the first time, the monster in my arms wasn't the scariest thing in the night. I was, and he loved me for it. Chapter 9. The Truth in the Ashes. Ethan's darkest secret. He is the last primordial who slaughtered the last Lupomancer to keep the world from burning. We didn't speak for 3 days after the circle. We limped north, higher into the Cascades, until the snow got deep enough to swallow sound, and the only thing left was cold and truth. We found shelter in the husk of an old fire lookout tower, wind screaming through broken windows, frost painting the walls white. On the 3rd night, the sky cleared. Stars pressed close, sharp as broken glass. I built a small fire in the rusted stove. Ethan sat on the opposite side of the room, knees drawn up, staring at nothing. Silver blood had crusted along the new scars the chains left. He hadn't let me touch them. I was done waiting. "Tell me," I said. He didn't pretend not to understand. His voice came out raw, ancient, scraped clean of every defense. 912 years ago, the last Lupomancer was born. Her name was Alice. She was everything you are, only angrier. The earth loved her too much. She loved it back too hard. When the Pax tried to cage her, she cracked the continent open from the Rockies to the sea. Volcanoes woke, rivers ran backward, 500,000 souls gone in a week. He dragged a hand over his face. I was younger then, still human at the core. I loved her, she loved me, and when she started losing the fight with the power, she begged me to stop her. So I did the only thing I could think of. I killed her, drank her heart's blood under a black moon, became the thing that could contain what she couldn't. Silence rang louder than the wind. "I thought ending the line would end the cycle," he said. I was wrong. The earth just waited. 9 centuries later it made another one. You! I couldn't breathe. He finally looked at me. His eyes were silver all the way through. No white left. I came to your birthing den that night, planning to do it again. Mercy kill, quick, clean. Then I saw you, tiny, screaming, green gold eyes already bleeding from your skin. And I couldn't. His voice cracked. I bit you instead, hid you, told myself I was buying time, told myself someone else could fix it. But there is no one else. There never was. He crawled across the floor until he knelt in front of me. Kill me, Harlyn, he whispered, before you burn like she did, before I have to watch it again, before I have to be the monster one more time. Tears froze on my cheeks. I cupped his face. Blood, frost, centuries of guilt under my palms. I won't become the monster you had to be, I said. We'll be something new. He laughed, wet and broken. You don't understand. The power isn't evil, it's just too big. One day you'll love something more than the world can bear, or you'll lose something you can't survive, and the earth will answer with fire. It always does. I leaned forward until our foreheads touched. Then we make sure I never have to choose between love and the world, I said, because you're not taking that choice away from me. I kissed him, not gentle, not sweet, acclaiming. He groaned into my mouth, hands fisting in my hair like I was the only solid thing left in his universe. When we broke apart, both of us were shaking. I'm terrified, he admitted against my lips. Good, I said. Be terrified with me. I pulled back just far enough to meet his eyes. I choose you, Ethan Starrk. Not because the earth demands it. Not because fate is cruel. I choose you because you waited 400 years for someone who could stand in the fire with you and not flinch. His breath hitched. I pressed his hand over my heart, then placed mine over his. Together, we're not a bomb. We're a forge. Something shattered behind his eyes. Old, careful walls crumbling. He pulled me into his lap, buried his face in my neck, and for the first time since I'd known him, he let himself cry. Silent, shoulder-shaking sobs that tasted like centuries of guilt. I held him while the fire burned low and the stars watched. When the tears finally stopped, he lifted his head. His voice was steady again, but different. Lighter. Then we burn the old story, he said, and we write a new one. I smiled through my own tears. Starting now. Outside, the wind quieted. Inside the ruined tower, two monsters who had finally stopped running from each other curled together under a shared coat and let the coldest night of the year try to touch us. It couldn't. We were already warm. Chapter 10. Crown of Root and Fang. We came back to the original ritual circle at dusk on the new moon. No storm this time. Only silence so complete the snow didn't dare fall. The granite still bore the scars of everything that had happened here. Silver blood frozen in cracks, black glass veins running through stone. My old rejection mark burned away forever. Hundreds of wolves waited in perfect rings, every alpha, every pack, every soul who had once watched me kneel. They parted when I walked through. I wore white. Not surrender. Rebirth. The dress moved like living bark and moonlit water, runes glowing soft gold beneath the fabric. My hair was loose, tangled with living vines that bloomed tiny white flowers with every step. Ethan walked one pace behind my left shoulder, close enough to touch, far enough to let the world see I needed no shield. Higan waited in the center. He was healed, whole, but the fear in his eyes was new and permanent. He stood alone. No enforcers, no guards, just him and the weight of what he had become. I stopped 5 feet away. The circle held its breath. I looked at every face, my parents, Lyra, the High Alpha, wolves who had spat on me, wolves who had wept when I rewrote the laws. Then I spoke, and the earth itself carried my voice. This is where I was broken, I said. Tonight I finished becoming whole. I raised both hands. The granite circle rose in perfect pillars of stone and living root, weaving upward into a crown of natural arches above us. Moonlight, new, thin, silver, poured through the gaps like liquid mercury. Every wolf dropped to their knees without being asked. I turned to Higan. He tried to hold my gaze and failed. "I could kill you," I said quietly. "I could bury you here and let the circle forget your name. But the strongest hand isn't the one that hits the hardest. It's the one that rebuilds." I stepped forward until we were toe to toe. He flinched when I touched his cheek. Gentle, almost tender. "I forgive you," I said. A shocked inhale rippled through the packs. "Not because you deserve it," I continued, "but because I refuse to carry your poison another day." I pressed my palm over his heart. Power flowed, soft, warm, unstoppable. Old mating laws that still clung to his bloodline unraveled like smoke. New runes wrote themselves across his skin in glowing green. Reject no one. Force no one. Protect always. He gasped, tears cutting clean tracks through the dirt on his face. I stepped back. "Live better," I told him, "or the earth will know." Then I turned to the circle and raised my voice one last time. "From tonight forward, no wolf will ever stand where I stood and hear the moon turn its face away. The ritual is ended. The circle is open to any who love, any who choose, any who are brave enough to be kind." I slammed both palms to the stone. Silver and green light exploded upward in a perfect column that touched the stars. Every pack bond on the continent flared, rewrote itself, settled into something freer. When the light faded, the pillars lowered back into the earth like they had never been. Silence. Then Lyra ran to me, threw her arms around my waist, and every wolf followed. They didn't bow. They knelt only long enough to press foreheads to the stone in gratitude, then rose as equals. I looked for Ethan. He stood just outside the circle, eyes shining with something too fierce for tears. I walked to him. The crowd parted again, sensing what was coming. I stopped in front of him. He dropped to one knee, not submission, offering. His voice carried like a vow, older than language. "My alpha, my moon, my only law." I cupped his scarred, beautiful face and pulled him to his feet. Our fingers threaded together. I turned us to face the packs, side by side, equal, unafraid. And under a sky, finally unafraid of my light, with root and fang and heart and earth as my witness, I spoke the final truth. "She was the broken piece who chose to heal," I said, "and she was finally home." The circle erupted in howls, joy, grief, wonder, release. Ethan pulled me close, lips brushing my temple. "Welcome home, little queen." I smiled into his shoulder, runes glowing soft and steady. The snow finally began to fall, gentle, forgiving, new. And somewhere deep in the earth, the last Lupomancer's story ended not in fire, but in roots that grew towards sunlight. We had rewritten the ending. Together. The end.